Hello again, and welcome to Aviation News Talk, a weekly show with relevant news and flying tips for pilots and student pilots to help keep you safe. I'm Max Trescott. For our main topic today, we have a Newsmakers edition. We'll be talking with Rod Rakic about an innovative new way that's just been announced for renter pilots to buy renter's insurance in a way that could save you money and might include a discount based upon your actual flying performance, so you don't want to miss that. Last week in episode 151, we talked with pilot examiner Seth Lake about how to determine if an aircraft is airworthy. So if you didn't hear that, you may want to check it out. And if you haven't done so already, please click that little subscribe button in whatever app that you're listening to us now. That helps other people find the show, and it's the only way to get every new episode automatically downloaded to your phone. Of course, it's free, so take a moment and just click on subscribe now. And speaking of free, this episode is totally free, but we have a few hundred supporters that support the show each month via credit card. We'll tell you how to do that later at aviationnewstalk.com/awesome and aviationnewstalk.com/PayPal. Coming up in the news, EAA has just announced a way that anyone can experience AirVenture this year. The FAA has approved online flight instruction at one facility, and a helicopter gets hit by a police drone, and we'll tell you where that happened. All this and more, and the news starts now. From kitplanes.com, EAA to hold Spirit of Aviation Week. EAA has announced that it will hold a week-long virtual event to celebrate the aviation community in the wake of the cancellation of AirVenture in Oshkosh, Wisconsin due to COVID-19. According to EAA, the Spirit of Aviation Week will offer streamed and on-demand content that focuses on aviation-related education, information, and entertainment. In addition to featuring everything from airshow performers to military and space programs, the group says the event will showcase warbirds, home-built, vintage aircraft, aerobatics, and ultralights. EAA CEO Jack Pelton said, "Nothing can replace the Oshkosh experience in person during AirVenture Week, as that event personifies the common passion we have for flight in all its wonderful ways. As unfortunate as it was that the cancellation of AirVenture 2020 took away that personal experience, countless people and groups have stepped forward to ask what they could do to virtually create something from Oshkosh that brings us together as aviators and aviation enthusiasts." Spirit of Aviation Week will take place July 21 through the 25th at eaatogether.org. EAA expects to publish an event schedule in the next few weeks. Highlights will include presentations, forums and discussions, home building workshops and tips, a virtual exhibit space, and stories from the EAA community. From liberty.edu, Liberty University has an innovative method for remote simulator flight training. The Liberty University School of Aeronautics has received FAA approval to provide remote simulator training in response to the COVID-19 limitations on face-to-face instruction. Rick Roof, interim dean, said that through existing technology, creativity, and the desire to serve their students, the SOA simulation team, faculty, and staff have worked together to provide remote training by instructors while students use the university's advanced aviation training device on campus. This flight training model is not currently utilized in any other collegiate aviation program. The school's digital instructional delivery method allows instructors to completely monitor and control the simulator operating systems, see all of its functions, and converse with a student virtually via remotely controlled cameras and commercially available video conference software. Though students must access the AATDs at the School of Aeronautics' newly constructed simulator complex on campus, the faculty member or flight instructor can be located almost anywhere, 6 feet away, next door, or even across the U.S., and can control the flight simulator through a secured network connection. With a remote camera, instructors can interact with the students and monitor each step of their progress. Kevin Martin, simulator department manager, said that as the staff worked to address the challenges created by state social distancing restrictions, their innovation created not only solutions but opportunities, such as the ability to use remote flight instructors. Our goal is to train students more effectively, safer, and at a cheaper cost, and we do this through technology innovation and thinking outside the box, he said. He said the school has tried for years to find a way to use the talent that comes out of the airlines and other aviation professions. Quote, "The problem is trying to take someone who is retiring or is at the end of their career and have them relocate to Liberty," he said. "But if you have them teach via simulator part-time from wherever they live, now you're starting to really draw on a much larger pool of potential instructors." So that's a rather creative solution. I bet we'll see more of that in the future. From FlyingMag.com, Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University announced it would return to face-to-face instruction on June 30th. The next phase in reopening is planned for ERAU's Daytona Beach, Florida, and Prescott, Arizona campuses. In doing so, the university will follow all local, state, and federal guidelines, including the following measures: limiting classroom capacity, optimizing class schedules to minimize contact, pre-screening returning students, requiring cloth face masks in all common areas, both indoors and outdoors, and daily wellness checks. If students have recently been sick, they are not allowed to come back to campus until they have met any quarantine and testing requirements. ERAU President Barry Butler said, "Our plan focuses on statistical risk testing, risk mitigation, support for contact tracing, and most importantly, education. We're continuing to educate our community on the risks, create redundancy across all of our safety standards, and finalize our testing protocols." From avweb.com, aircraft deliveries, not surprisingly, declined across all segments during the first quarter of 2020, according to the quarterly aircraft shipments and billing reports released by GAMA, the General Aviation Manufacturers Association. Compared to the first quarter of 2019, the total number of airplane deliveries in Q1 dropped approximately 21% from 511 to 404. Total helicopter deliveries declined from 170 in Q1 2019 to 122 in 2020, a drop of 28.2%. Piston helicopter deliveries saw a 44% drop at just 37 units delivered for the quarter. The turboprop airplane segment recorded a 42% drop decline in shipments with 71 aircraft delivered. Business jet deliveries dropped 19.1%, and turbine helicopter shipments declined by 18.3%. Piston airplane shipments saw the smallest drop at an 11.7% decrease from Q1 2019. Overall, the value of airplane shipments delivered in Q1 declined approximately 21% from $4.3 billion last year to $3.4 billion in the first quarter this year. And I should mention that this is all about aircraft shipments, not about orders. So we really don't have any information about what new incoming orders were like. We do know that some of these production lines were interrupted and their employees furloughed, which is why their deliveries declined this year. But I imagine they're going to bounce back pretty quickly as manufacturers put their staffs back to work. From GeneralAviationNews.com, Avionics sales declined 8.8% in the first quarter. With the ADS-B deadline behind us and the COVID-19 pandemic here, Avionics sales dropped worldwide 8.8% according to the Aircraft Electronics Association. In the first 3 months of the year, total worldwide business and GA avionics sales totaled more than $660 million, as reported by the participating companies. That represents an 8.8% decrease in total sales compared to the first quarter last year. It also ends a streak of 12 consecutive quarters with a reported increase in year-over-year sales. Of the more than $600 million in the first quarter 2020, 52.3% came from the retrofit market, that's avionics that are installed after the plane was originally sold, while so-called forward fit sales, those are avionics that are installed by airframe manufacturers during the original production, those amounted to 47% of first quarter sales. And in other avionics news, this comes from a press release from Garmin, and it relates to a story we talked about in episode 148 about the threat to our GPS receivers, because the FCC recently approved the use of frequencies right next to those used by GPS and radio altimeters for building 5G cell phone towers by a company called Legato Networks. This comes from a press announcement from Garmin. They say that they are pleased to announce that they have joined a broad aviation industry coalition urging the FCC to reconsider its report and order to repurpose C-band frequency spectrum nearby to the frequency band that's used for safety-critical FAA-certified radio altimeters, including Garmin's GRA 5500 and GRA 55. Radio altimeters are essential to safe airplane and helicopter operations, allowing pilots to land safely and avoid terrain, particularly during poor weather conditions and low visibility. The industry coalition is working to ensure radio altimeters are appropriately protected from prospective flexible use applications, including 5G operations. So imagine that. It's one thing entirely if your GPS were to stop working when you're perhaps hundreds of feet above the ground. It's an entirely different thing if your radio altimeter stops working, if you were using it, for example, for a Cat 3 ILS approach when you're maybe 50 feet above the ground. So good luck to Garmin and others involved in getting the FCC to reconsider this plan. And from GeneralAviationNews.com, the Aviation Instructor's Handbook has been updated. Last updated in 2008, this new edition was developed by the FAA in cooperation with aviation educators and the industry to help beginning instructors understand and apply the fundamentals of instruction. And by the way, there is an exam that CFIs have to take called Fundamentals of Instruction Knowledge Exam. So this book is really excellent for studying for that. The new edition expands and updates the existing material, including scenario-based training relative to assessments, the submission process of an airman certificate and/or rating application through IACRA, and endorsements. It also incorporates new areas of safety concerns and technical information not previously covered, such as referencing the Airman Certification Standards, or ACS, alongside the PTS Practical Test Standards, teaching practical risk management during flight instruction, and information for remote pilots. It's available as a softcover book for $19.95, and I believe you can also find it as a free PDF on the FAA.gov website. And from avweb.com comes great news. Epic delivers their first 2 certified E1000s. After a 16-year history with more twists and turns than a Robert Ludlum novel, Epic Aircraft has delivered 2 certified E1000 high-performance single turboprops and plans to fill its order book as soon as possible. The Bend, Oregon company, which occupies the former Columbia Cessna facilities at the airport there, has orders from all over the world for the plane, which cruises at near jet speed of 330 knots and climbs at 4,000 feet per minute. According to Lawrence Brook, one of the first owners of the aircraft, quote, "This is a true performance aircraft able to compete directly with my Phenom 100, but at less than half the operating costs. Plus, it provides access to shorter airstrips that jets just can't reach." Epic is an innovative company that complements its exceptional engineering and technology with a highly personalized approach to doing business. That personal touch could be the result of the company's rather unusual beginnings. It started as a kit company with a 49% builder assist program in Bend, Oregon. And by the way, I remember being in Bend in 2006, getting trained at the Columbia Aircraft Factory, and Epic was in business in a small hangar on the other side of the field at that time selling kit aircraft. That scheme ended in a legal mess that resulted in the original CEO, Rick Schramek, eventually being arrested and charged criminally, but it left 7 partially built aircraft in the original facility in Bend. The owner of one of those planes, Doug King, eventually took over the company in court-ordered partnership with a Chinese company before one of the richest families in Russia bought the whole works and funded the certification program. The pandemic has hampered the ramping up of production, but the company is figuring that out. King, who is still the CEO, said the employees have persevered, engineered, and improvised in order to keep our production lines moving so we can deliver planes and meet customer expectations. And best wishes to them. I think it's great. Anytime a company is able to certify a new airplane, that is a huge achievement that most aircraft companies are never able to do. So congratulations, Epic. In international news from avweb.com, NAV Canada raising their fees by 29.5%. The coronavirus pandemic will hit operators who fly in Canada squarely on the bottom line as NAV Canada, the not-for-profit private corporation that runs air traffic services, hikes fees for commercial operations an average of 29.5%. NAV Canada isn't allowed to make money, but it also has to earn enough to cover costs, and with the drastic drop in traffic, the user fees it collects have slowed to a trickle. Since most of its costs are fixed and not influenced significantly by traffic volume, it's facing a huge shortfall at the current rates, which were based on the record traffic levels recorded in 2018 and early 2019. Most of the increases for various ATC services will come into effect September 1, assuming the proposal survives the 60-day comment period. They will not apparently apply immediately to the flat rate of $68.40 a year paid by a recreational and aerial spraying aircraft. NAV Canada says it's done everything it can to save money, but it's projecting that it will be 242 million Canadian dollars short of the minimum revenue level it needs just to borrow enough money to keep operating. AOPA says the situation in Canada is a teaching moment for proponents of a privatized ATC in the U.S., an issue that came up again just 2 years ago. According to Jim Kuhn, AOPA Senior Vice President of Governmental Affairs, quote, "This fee increase proposal in Canada reminds us of what might happen to the ATC system here in the United States. Fortunately, members of Congress came to understand that moving our ATC system out of the federal government was simply a power grab that would have done nothing to lower prices, reduce delays, or speed up the modernization program, and AOP members have realized this and responded to ensure we don't go down that path." And also from Canada, this comes from aeronews.net. Canada allows for online Aero-Medical exams. COPA, the Canadian Owner Pilots Association, notes that recognizing that many civil aviation medical examiners are not seeing patients, Transport Canada has announced temporary provisions for the renewal of medical certificates permitted the use of virtual visits instead. There are, of course, a number of limits. For example, if this is your first application for a medical certificate, you are out of luck. And if the examiner isn't sure about your qualifications for an issuance, he or she can still mandate the usual in-person medical examination. So for those of you used to doing lots of meetings online via Skype or Zoom, you might be able to now get your medical that way. And finally, from avweb.com, collision between a drone and a helicopter. Well, for many years we've speculated when that first collision would occur, and so far there's been at least one documented collision. But now we have another one, and it's a little ironic because, according to this headline, police helicopter collides with police drone. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police AS-350 helicopter and a Royal Canadian Mounted Police Skyranger R-60 surveillance drone collided while on a joint mission over a rural area of British Columbia in February. The mishap rated a 5 on a scale of 6 by Canada's Transportation Safety Board in terms of seriousness and was classified as a mid-air collision that resulted in a forced landing. The drone was one of two participating in policing activities with a helicopter about 15 miles from the small city of Houston in central British Columbia. The helicopter and drone came together at about 300 feet AGL. After obliterating the drone, the helicopter exhibited a brief vibration. The pilot headed for a clear spot on a road below. The precautionary landing was uneventful, and none of the 3 people aboard were hurt. It was a rather expensive lesson, according to the report. Quote, maintenance staff found damage primarily to the main rotor blades, along with superficial damage on the tail boom and tail rotor. The affected components were removed per the maintenance manual for repairs or overhaul as required. The RPAS drone was destroyed. The drone is popular among police departments and was made by Aeron, that's A-E-R-Y-O-N Systems. List price is, get this, about $100,000. The report said it weighed about 6 pounds, but the manufacturer says it's more like 10 pounds. And while it would be easy to make a joke about all this, it shows just how serious the threat is of drones to aircraft if even the police can't figure out how to keep their own aircraft and drones from hitting each other. Well, that's the news for this week. Coming up, my weekly updates. And then we'll get on to our main topic, which is talking about renter's insurance with Rod Rakic. All right here on the Aviation News Talk podcast. And now here's a fun flying destination from Hamish Kebb.
Hi Max, Hamish here. If you're considering flying the Grand Canyon, a fun place to start is Marble Canyon, L41. Marble Canyon has a spectacular approach alongside tall cliffs and beside the Colorado River. After landing, it's a short walk to Navajo Footbridge, suspended 470 feet above the Colorado River. As you walk across the bridge, you can watch the rafters blow and eagles nesting in the cliffs. Across from the airport is a restaurant and a hotel. After flying the Grand Canyon and the spectacular scenery, consider bypassing Grand Canyon Airport and landing at Valley 40G. Valley has a great Planes of Flame museum with a good range of jet and World War II aircraft. It also has a restaurant nearby. Cheers, Hamish.
Hamish, thanks so much for sending that. And if you have a fun flying destination that you would like to share with everyone here, please go ahead and do what Hamish did. Just go ahead and take your smartphone, look for the Voice Memos app, and you can record about 90 seconds and then email it to me at aviationnewstalk@gmail.com, or just go out to aviationnewstalk.com, click on Listener Questions at the top, and that will allow you to record right there on the website up to 90 seconds. Let's see, just to talk about a few things I've run across here in the last week or two, I wanted to mention that the May-June 2020 issue of the FAA Safety Briefing focuses on the importance of proper communication in aviation and its critical role in furthering safety. They've got feature articles on the topic, including basics of good aviation grammar, how to use correct phraseology to avoid confusion or misunderstandings, and how to best leverage the technology and equipment at your disposal to maximize communication efficiency and accuracy. And of course, I'll have a link to that in the show notes. By the way, the FAA Safety Briefing is just a wonderful magazine. I'd suggest that you go ahead and put it on your reading list when it comes out every 2 months. And a couple weeks ago in episode 150, I talked about multiple accidents that all happened within a 2-day period, all of which sounded like they might have been caused by pilots who lacked proficiency. A couple of recent ones I've come across fall into the same category. For example, about 10 days ago, a Cirrus SR20 in San Antonio, Texas, had what's been described as a landing area overshoot, and it resulted in minor injuries to the pilot. This comes from catherinesreport.com. Again, I'll include a link in the show notes. It says the pilot reported that during the approach, the airspeed was about 80 knots, which, by the way, would be just about right on, but he was slightly high. The pilot stated that the airplane floated down the runway further than normal before it touched down, and when he determined that he would not have enough runway to stop, he aborted the landing. The plane did not climb as he expected and subsequently impacted trees. The pilot added that he believed that the reason for the lack of climb was due to his failure to retract the flaps to 50%, which, by the way, means the flaps were fully down as he was trying to go around and climb out. A witness reported that the airplane landed further down the runway than normal, departed the runway, and began the takeoff from the grass alongside the runway. So if the witness is correct, it sounds like the pilot may have ended off to one side of the runway in the grass before he started his go-around. The runway length is 2,890 feet, but it's only 40 feet wide, and the pilot had a total time of 116 hours. Now, we've talked a lot in the past about the importance of having a stable approach, and if your approach is unstable, you really need to go around. One of the criteria for a stable approach is that you're on a normal glide path to the runway, aiming for the touchdown zone. This pilot was apparently high on approach and touched down long on the runway, which means he had an unstable approach and should have gone around before touching down. And it sounds like after touching down, he was trying to go around with full flaps, which of course is another problem. And it's not just low-time GA pilots who get into trouble because of unstable approaches. An Airbus A320 airliner crashed in Pakistan right around the same time. 97 people on board were killed and 2 survived. There have been reports that that aircraft was doing 200 knots as it was approaching to land, which is 60 to 70 knots faster than the normal approach speed for an A320. Of course, being on your target airspeed is another criteria for a stable approach, and anytime you're too fast on approach, you should just go around. Now, apparently the pilots forgot to lower the landing gear. The plane scraped its engines on the runways 3 times on its first attempt to land. Now, just imagine the damage this must have caused to the engines. As about a minute later, the plane crashed while trying to come around for another landing. So please, if you do have an unstable approach, go around. Now, for example, this comes from the Cirrus Flight Operations Manual. It says for a stable approach, you must meet all of these criteria: proper airspeed, correct flight path, correct aircraft configuration for phase of flight, appropriate power setting for aircraft configuration, normal angle and rate of descent, and only minor corrections are required to all of those to correct for deviations. And finally, they say a go-around must be executed if any of the above conditions are not met and the aircraft is not stabilized by the time you reach 500 feet AGL. And while assembling the news for this show, I found a story that made me a little sad. It's, of course, always sad when an airport closes, but it's even more so if it's an airport you've been to. My thanks to Jeremy King for his blog article at Plane & Pilot magazine called Farewell to Trinca Airport. He wrote, "The disappearance of one little country airport won't be lamented by many, but for those who knew Trinca, the loss will hurt. Trinca is slated to close in a few months, a quiet death assigned to a small field whose passing will hardly draw notice from the aviation community. It's no Meigs Field or Santa Paula. I think, by the way, he meant Santa Monica. A rural strip in the middle of New Jersey was an unlikely place for a farm boy turned aviator from Georgia to be standing on a cold February day, but I'd also been there 17 years before as a college kid with wet ink on my pilot and mechanic certificates." Well, Trinca has special meaning for me. It's located in northwest New Jersey, not far from Bud Lake, where I lived for 7 years while working my first job out of college at Hewlett-Packard's division in Rockaway, New Jersey. One of my coworkers, whose name I've forgotten, unfortunately, had an airplane based on the field there. It's a grass strip, and it was a little hard to find in the days before GPS. I feel a special connection to it as in 1991 or 92, Flying Magazine wrote an article about it. I sent the magazine a letter to the editor sharing some of my memories of the airport, and they published it a few months later, making it the first time I was published in an aviation magazine. So, farewell, Trinca Airport. We will definitely miss you. And here's a quick item sent to me by journalist Isaac Alexander. You can follow him on Twitter at JetCityStarr. Provided a link to an article from EASA. It says that EASA certifies electric aircraft first type certification for fully electric plane worldwide. The European Union Aviation Safety Agency announced the certification of electric aircraft, the Pipistrel Velis Electro, the first type certification worldwide of a fully electric aircraft, and an important milestone in the quest for environmentally sustainable aviation. This is an exciting breakthrough, said EASA Executive Director Patrick Kai. This is the first electric aircraft EASA has certified, but it will certainly not be the last as the aviation industry pursues new technologies to reduce noise and emissions and to improve the sustainability of aviation. The Velis Electro is a two-seat aircraft intended primarily for pilot training. Slovenia-based Pipistrel is a leading small aircraft designer and manufacturer, specializing in energy-efficient and affordable high-performance aircraft. The Velis Electro joins a product lineup of similar but conventionally powered aircraft. And you're probably familiar with the Pipistrel Alpha Electra, I think that's the name of it. That is an all-electric aircraft, and it's been sold here in the United States. However, it's not certified as a Part 23 aircraft. It's, I believe, in the experimental category. So congratulations to Pipistrel for this. And let me tell you what I've been up to. Last week, for the first time in months, I went to the flight school where I teach, and I gave a lesson in the simulator. We both wore masks as required by the club. And while the two chairs for the simulator are a little closer than 6 feet apart, for most of the session I stood back by the door, which put me about 7 to 8 feet behind the pilot. It worked well, though occasionally I had to ask him a question about what was on the screen, as I couldn't see everything on the screen from that distance. Hopefully I'm going to return to teaching in the cockpit in the coming weeks. The Orange County has been a hotspot for the virus, and I've been waiting for the number of new cases to decrease further. And while they have leveled off, they just haven't come down as much as I'd like. So I'll continue to monitor the situation and slowly get back to teaching. In the meantime, I want to thank the 3 to 4% of all listeners who continue to support me via Patreon and PayPal, as that's my major source of income right now. So I greatly appreciate that. And if you'd like to support the show, it's really quick and easy to do. 2 ways to do it. Just go out to aviationnewstalk.com/awesome or aviationnewstalk.com/Patreon. That'll take you out to our Patreon site where you can enter a credit card and donate a few dollars per month. That'll be charged to your credit card, and we will read your name here on the show. You can also go to aviationnewstalk.com/PayPal, where you can make either a one-time contribution or a monthly contribution. And depending upon what level you sign up at, you will get various goodies. So, for example, at the $4 a month level, people get the complete show notes from this show. At the $8 a month level, they also get a list of all the cut news stories that we were unable to include for time. And this particular week, we have 13 news stories that we didn't get to. Those are included at the $8 and up contributions. At the $35 level, you'll get free access to my pilotlearning.com courses. Currently, we have courses up there for the Garmin G1000, VFR, and IFR, and also for flying WAAS instrument approaches. And then at the $50 a month level, we have our mega supporters, and I read their name on each of our shows here. We don't have any new mega supporters, but we have a number of new Patreon supporters, and they include Martin Jansen, Dyson Hepting, Scott Wiederhold, David Stroh, who edited his pledge up to $10 a month, Joe Shelton at $20 a month, and Mike McGee. We also have some new PayPal monthly contributors, including Kenneth Wilson at $35 a month, so he'll be getting our pilotlearning.com courses, and Gopal Kumar, a good friend of mine who generally goes by Kumar. He's a flight instructor at Palo Alto. Thanks so much for your contributions. Now let me tell you briefly about our mega supporters who donate $50 a month or more. I mention their name on each of our news shows, and I send them one of my books after 2 months. They include Brian Deere, who lives here in Northern California, flies the Turbo 206, Tyson Weiss, the co-founder of ForeFlight, Victor Vogel, who lives in Central PA and flies the Cirrus, Tim Delaney, who's been flying for nearly 50 years. He flies an SR20 in Northern California. Stephen Elop flies a Turbo 182 and a Citation CJ3+. He's the CEO of API Jet. Mike Williams, he's president of Keomac and also TCB Composites, maker of composite spinners and bulkheads for GA aircraft, and he flies a 172. Seth Lake, you heard him last week on episode 151. He's a DPE giving check rides. He specializes in the multi-engine rating in his pair of beach travel airs. You can check out his flight school in Arkansas at vsl.aero. Rick Miller, he instructs in the Cincinnati area out of the Lincoln Flight Training Center, and he also teaches owners who have their own Pipers, Cessna, Beechcraft, or Cicadas. He'd like to teach full-time, but he's still hopefully got that day job. Justin Winter, who brokers real estate on Lake Keowee in South Carolina, he flies a SR20. Carl and Ann Rossi of Maine Cooncat Aviation, owners and operators of 3 Cessna T240 aircraft. Johnny McDade, singer, songwriter, musician, and record producer. Jim Goldfuss, he's teaching as a ground instructor while he works on his CFI certificate. He's teaching at the Republic Airport on Long Island. He also does online coaching for aspiring pilots. You can find him on his Facebook page called Ground Point 9, and that's the number 9. Charlie Mason flies out of Santa Monica. He's been out of flying for a long time, and he's checking out in a Cirrus SR20. Vincent Salimi, he's council member for the city of Pinole, California. He's the owner of Salimi Construction Management in San Francisco, California. Jim Hopp, he's a CFI and teaches at Advantage Aviation at the Palo Alto, California airport. Lars Litjens, he's our youngest Patreon supporter. He flies a Redbird simulator until he's big enough to fly his dad's Cessna 205. Dad, by the way, sells boats in the western states at boulderboats.com. Joseph Sheehan flew in the Navy for 8 years, has been flying for the past 3 years in a SR-22, and he's just about to take delivery of a Vision jet. Josiah Freeman, he's working on his instrument rating. Dylan Caldwell, he's a new AME in Florida at the Naples Municipal Airport, so if you need a basic med, second or third class physical, you can contact him at aviatorsclinic.com. Ted Panzician, student pilot. He lives about 15 miles south of Philadelphia in Delaware, and he likes watching airliners join the ILS-9 right at Philadelphia. And William Birch donates to the show in the memory of his son, Lieutenant J.G. Wallace Birch, who was a Navy pilot. Bruce Dickerson is a financial planner living in Georgia. He flies a K-35 Bonanza. Don Heikala, he is with Professional Instrument Courses. They conduct 10-day instrument courses, IFR finish-up, and IFR refresher courses. You can find out more about them at iflyifr.com. Stephen Bush, he's the owner of Lone Star Helicopters in Lago Vista, Texas. He mentions that he does a lot of add-on ratings from fixed-wing to helicopter, and you can find them at lonestarheli.com. Don Delman, who's a professional pilot, he runs an airline flight department. He also is a CFI and flies a Bonanza. And Rick Mattis, owner of PointWise, which makes CFD, that's computational fluid dynamics simulation software used by aerospace companies, and you can find them at pointwise.com. And I'd like to thank all of you who support the show in any way that you do. I really greatly appreciate it. Coming up next, we're going to be talking with Rod Rakic about renter's insurance, right here on the Aviation News Talk podcast. And now let me tell you a little bit about Rod Rakic. Rod was the first guest we ever had here on Aviation News Talk way back in episode number 4. And at that time, he was running Open Airplane and Fly Auto, companies he co-founded that were designed to simplify GA aircraft rental and charter bookings. Prior to that, Rod worked for a number of different firms providing direction to clients on e-marketing and online advertising strategies. He's been a member of the Civil Air Patrol for over 18 years, and more recently, he's gotten his CFI certificate and has hired on as an airline pilot. He's also working as a product manager for Starr Insurance, but above all, he's always been an innovator, which is why we're talking with him again here today. Rod, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me back.
Great to have you back. You've just had your fingers in so many different things over the years. Do you just enjoy trying lots of different things?
Or I can't keep a job. I'm not sure which it is, but I always seem to find myself on new adventures.
I was going to say, you and Rob Mark, who's actually the guy who introduced us years ago.
Yeah. Also lives near Chicago. So every once in a while we get to sit down and have a pizza.
Yeah, exactly. Well, today we're going to talk about insurance. And I know that's something you actually got some experience with back in the days of Open Airplane, because there was a component of that where you had to get familiar with insurance and work with insurance companies and so on. Now you're working with Starr. Tell us a little bit about aircraft renters insurance in general before we get down to the new product. Why do people renting an aircraft need their own insurance?
Well, one, because it's often required by the FBO or the flying club that you're going to rent an airplane from. Also because you want coverage that protects you if an insurance company invokes something called subrogation. If folks are worried about losing their house or not being able to take that vacation that they've been saving up for because of the risks involved in flying airplanes, people wouldn't fly as much. So insurance is important.
Well, I know that FBOs that are renting aircraft tend to have their own insurance. I think a lot of people figure, hey, that probably covers me. To what extent does it cover them and not cover them?
Often when a flying club or an FBO says that insurance is part of the price, that doesn't often protect a pilot from something called subrogation. So let's say you had something as simple as a prop strike and a coyote came across the runway at the last moment or whatever it is. That could really be kind of a bummer when the insurance carrier pays the flying club or pays the FBO for the incident, but then you get a letter saying, please wire the amount of $30,000 to this number because they subrogated the claim against you. You weren't the one paying the insurance bill. You're not necessarily going to be the one being protected. If you are found to be negligent by the carrier, they can subrogate and they can send the claim your way. The greatest thing about renter's insurance, it's not typically that expensive, but it does protect you. You're paying not only for, say, the liability and the hull and all that kind of insurance, but you're really, for what isn't a lot of money, partnering with an insurance carrier that's going to protect you in case there is a claim of negligence. Hiring a lawyer and protecting yourself from something like that's going to be super expensive. And so, I don't know, for $150 a year, I could sleep better because I have renter's insurance.
Yeah, indeed. I certainly don't want to get sued, and it's nice if you've got someone who's going to pay the bill for the lawyer if you do get sued. So, for example, at my local flying club, they have insurance, but there is a deductible. And so, for example, it may cover me up to $3,500 if it's just kind of act of God, goose flies into the airplane. And we've had that because we've got nesting geese near the airport, unfortunately. Or $5,000 if it's negligence. And my understanding is renter insurance would then cover that deductible. Does that make sense?
Yeah, non-owned insurance typically includes liability. This covers damages that caused by the accident. Maybe you take out a few taxi lights in a ground loop or something. Medical payments, if someone in the airplane gets hurt. And then physical damage. So that's typically what helps you pay the insurance deductible. The FBO would be looking for you to pay otherwise if something gets bent. So those are typically the components of what you're looking at when you choose coverage.
Okay. And then how does coverage get priced? Is it kind of a la carte? Do you kind of buy a little bit of this and a little bit of that based on what you think you need?
Yeah. So typically it's complicated, like everything in aviation. It depends. Funny enough, in personal non-owned coverage, the number of hours you have in your logbook or the ratings you've earned really doesn't have much effect on the price of the insurance premium. It really comes down to what are you buying, right? Single, multi-engine, rotor, seaplane, CFI? Do you fly with the Civil Air Patrol? And then what discounts do you get applied? So, are you loss free? Are you a CSIP? Are you a Master CFI? Have a SAFE membership? And then finally, something like what we've got new in the Stargate app.
Well, so tell us about that then. So that's kind of what's new and innovative here. What is Stargate?
So Stargate is aviation renter's insurance reimagined. It's powered by something we developed called high definition underwriting. It's a free iPad app that puts data from the cockpit that pilots already capture to work, helping them fly safer with more control over the coverage that they buy. Pilots can save up to 35% on their renter's insurance, which they can now purchase by the month or by the year. So buying renter's insurance has never been easier. You can even use Apple Pay on your iPad to buy this coverage. You can buy coverage with just the app and be ready to fly the same day. When you get coverage from the Stargate app, you get an email immediately to confirm that you've got that coverage. It has a link. You can add a pass to the Apple Wallet on your iPhone. And documents like your insurance binder are then immediately available on the app.
Okay. So what if I wanted to change coverage from January to February to March and so on? Can I kind of get different coverage at different times?
So renter's insurance used to only be available for an annual policy. You wouldn't be able to buy just a 1 month policy or a 3 month policy, especially when you for folks that are in flight training, they might only need 6 months of coverage, right? And so this new product really gives you more control. And then you simply renew by the month. And again, because you've got a credit card on file, or you can use Apple Pay, it's just a tap of a button.
And so there's also an interface with Cloud Ahoy. For folks who aren't familiar with Cloud Ahoy, start by telling us what that is.
So Cloud Ahoy began as a tool for debriefing pilot performance in the cockpit post-flight. It visualizes maneuvers. The Stargate app uses a tool from Cloud Ahoy called CFI Assistant, and that objectively scores your performance based on standards and exceedances. When you share your track log to the Stargate app from your electronic flight bag software of choice, it uploads to Cloud Ahoy to get scored. And then we take it a step further and give you feedback on each maneuver. It gives you a running average of all your scores, which we call the total pilot score. And that score is what we use to actually calculate a potential discount to your renter's insurance.
Now, that's the part that wasn't quite clear to me when I was reading this. You're telling me that your actual performance can impact the cost of renter's insurance?
Sure. So renter's insurance has kind of all these different broad products and different prices, but you get some discounts for having no losses or being a CSIP like you. But what we've never had the ability to do is look at the pilot individually and their performance and their habits and measure those objectively, and then have that impact what the risk is of you as a pilot. And so have that be able to potentially benefit your price on the premium that you pay. And again, what we've designed into the product is that any data you share will never make the premium go up, but it can make it go down. And so if you're sharing your track logs and it's seeing that you're flying stabilized approaches, that you're not flying at the edges of the envelope, that you're demonstrating good habits in the cockpit, the insurance company can now take that into account and offer you a lower rate at renewal.
So I was just thinking, for example, if I'm flying a power-off approach, that's going to look like I'm coming in on a really short pattern and dropping in at a high rate. Is it going to be able to differentiate between that and a normal landing?
The Cloud Ahoy tool is actually really smart and knows, the difference between a steep spiral and a stall and, and all that, and sort of segments your maneuvers. We're actually looking at each maneuver, and then if you don't get a great score, we'll actually give you feedback on how to make those maneuvers better, because we really want the same thing. We want pilots to be safer. And that's really what the product is designed to do is, you can save some money on your insurance, but really it's about being more confident and being safer in the cockpit. You've got all the control when you're using this product. You're actually choosing which track logs on an individual basis to share with the app. So if I'm flying as an instructor pilot with a student and we're all kind of all over the sky, that's okay. I just I don't share that track log with the app.
Okay. Now, does this give me a free subscription to Cloud Ahoy, or do I have just limited capabilities of Cloud Ahoy? How does that work?
So Cloud Ahoy is a separate tool, has a separate subscription. When you create your account in the Stargate app, you can actually then either connect your existing Cloud Ahoy account to the app so that if you've been using Cloud Ahoy all this time, you can then use that to get your discount. Or you create a new Cloud Ahoy account and actually get 35 days of their Premium Pro product for free, where you get all the features, including individually scored maneuvers. If you let that lapse and you decide not to go ahead and buy Cloud Ahoy's subscription, you actually continue to get scoring free forever. You might not have all the features, but at least you're going to be able to get scoring, which is unique to this product. And so that will be able to then give you feedback on how you fly and help you be a safer pilot.
Got it. So if I'm just starting on day one, I'm interested in buying renter's insurance. Is it to my advantage to have previously submitted some track logs from Cloud Ahoy, or do I need to wait until after I've actually signed up to start doing that?
If you've got track logs in a Cloud Ahoy account, you connect that account to the Stargate app, even before you buy insurance, you'll be able to potentially get that discount. It's in real time. Whatever Cloud Ahoy knows about your flying, Stargate can score and take into account in real time. Otherwise, you could just do it as a renewal. Now, here's the thing. You don't have to buy insurance to use the Stargate app. And you can, without even creating a policy, and without buying insurance, you can still get feedback on your flying using the app. And then when you need renter's insurance, you simply turn it on with a few taps.
Oh, fascinating. So if I'm really interested, for example, just to kind of start trying it out, I can go ahead and have it score my flights. And then if I later decide to choose to buy insurance, I can do that?
Yes. And then the flip side, if you don't want to score your flights and you just want to buy insurance and you want to buy it by the month or by the year, you can do that too. So the two work great together, but they're not interdependent.
Got it. I know that, for example, when people buy insurance for their own aircraft, which is something totally different from what we're talking about right now, that's typically for a 1 year period of time. And if you've had good things happen in that year, they unfortunately won't go back and re-rate your policy and give you a discount. So for example, it's not atypical for companies to give discounts if you've added the instrument rating or a commercial certificate, or if you've got however many hundreds or thousands of hours in the aircraft and so on. It sounds like based on my performance, I might get a slightly different rate in any given month that I might choose to sign up with Stargate?
It's going to look at your pilot score and be able to offer you a discount based on that pilot score. So as that pilot score gets better, we actually have kind of a gradated algorithm that will actually give you a different discount based on what your score looks like. So as your scores improve, it has the potential to improve the discount.
I just started to wonder if maybe this will be something like somebody's credit score. Do you think people will be working to try and get their best possible pilot score?
But wouldn't that be great? Right? Wouldn't that be great if pilots were actively working to get their pilot score higher? And that means that they're flying more in a more standardized way. They're going to be safer. And that means they're going to bend less metal and they're going to be flying more and enjoying aviation. In fact, one of the things we built into the app is the ability to share your pilot score from the app to your Facebook page or to Twitter, or send it to someone as a text or an email.
Got it. Okay. So I'm guessing it won't be long before we have the pilot score standings where people can look up and see who's got the highest score in the country.
Well, we're just getting started. So, who knows what we'll build next.
The old competitive spirit in me is coming out here. It's like, who wouldn't want to be on top of those rankings?
Pilots are often very competitive. I think one of the first things we did out of the gate is make sure that you can at least use the tool to brag.
That's great. So tell us, what do the scores range from? I mean, can I get an F or a 0, or what's the scoring range look like?
So the CFI system from Clados Ahoy actually uses a range of 0 to 100. And it's, again, with the basic product, it's based on the total flight. When you've got the Pro trial or you've signed up for the Pro product, you get it by maneuver. And so 100 is really hard to get, and you have to be perfect. I'm seeing scores sort of above 50 are sort of in the okay range. Scores above 85 are in the really great range.
Okay. And is it based somewhat, I'm starting to feel like we're judging skating here for the Olympics. Is complexity involved in the scoring? I mean, if I do a triple Lutz while I'm out there flying, can I get a higher score?
No, it's actually it's looking at the maneuver and what are the ACS standards for that maneuver. And then different aspects of that maneuver through the algorithm that Clados Ahoy developed are looking at sort of, the stabilized measure of your approach is much more important to safety than, say, whether you're right on center line. So the stable approach criteria will be weighted more heavily than, say, other criteria. And so they're continually sort of tweaking this and making the algorithm smarter about how they can look at a piece of data on your flying. And essentially it's just segmenting a KML file for the nerds out there. But it's really looking at how the maneuver should be flown against not only the specifics of that maneuver, but also the specifics of the aircraft. So it knows that you're flying a Cessna 172. It's looking for the airspeeds and the performance that's appropriate for a 172. If you're flying that maneuver in a barren, the speeds would be different, and the algorithm is actually smart enough to know the difference.
Oh, good. That was something I was wondering about, because certainly that's a big issue we have in our traffic pattern where we're mixing Cirruses and Pilatuses with Citabrias, for example, and you'd expect different speeds for each of those.
Yeah, it's a fairly new product. It's gotten very robust very quickly. And so it was designed really for the training environment. What Starr did was really take this tool that was designed for the training environment and move it into the sort of the domain of everyday operations, right? Just flying somewhere for $100 hamburger, flying on a trip, the way we fly, really as pilots, sort of using the lifestyle that aviation brings us and being able to find a way to be able to incentivize pilots to be better, give them objective feedback. Because again, if you're only flying with a flight instructor every 24 months for that flight review, you don't get a lot of feedback on your flying unless you really screw something up and have to copy a phone number. So we want to sort of fill that gap.
No, nobody likes to copy a phone number. I'm curious, if I just stayed in the traffic pattern and all I did was landings, could I still get a high score in the upper 80s?
Yeah, it would actually look at each traffic pattern and score those patterns. So whether you're flying a trip somewhere, where you're flying instrument approaches, where you're just doing VFR work, it's looking at each maneuver individually and scoring them based on sort of what's the standard, what's the best way to fly that.
It's an interesting point. I hadn't thought about long cross countries. We've been talking mostly about maneuvers and landings thus far. Is it going to look at things such as how closely you hold your altitude, for example? If you're plus and minus 300 feet, you're all over the sky. Is that going to be a demerit?
Not really in the cruise portion, but absolutely if you're, for instance, flying a RNAV or some other instrument approach.
Oh, okay, great. So it's going to score my ability to stay above the MDA, for example, if I'm descending to minimums on it.
Yeah, we've really designed the product to be looking at the important things, not the minutia, really, but it's looking for habits that could potentially lead to you bending metal and giving you that feedback and reflecting back those habits. And if they're good, it gives you all kinds of kudos. And if they have room for improvement, actually at the maneuver level, we're actually giving you some tips on how to make the scores better.
Yeah, okay. Well, that's great. You're a relatively new airline pilot, and I know airline pilots have always been a little concerned about cockpit voice recorders and things like that. Do you think there are any privacy concerns here at all that people might come up with if their flight performance is being measured and is being applied to their insurance rates?
Great question. First of all, you have all the control, right? You actually have to hit the share button in the EFB to share that particular track log with the app. So if you feel like you don't want to do that, or if you decide that you sent it up and you don't want it to be there anymore, you can go into Cloud Ahoy and delete that track log. So one of the things we designed into the product is really being very careful about pilots' privacy and also making sure that they have all the control over the data that gets shared.
And do you anticipate that something like this might get applied to other kinds of insurance besides just renter's insurance?
Well, if you think about it, this kind of thing happens all other places, right? Like in the airline world, we have FOQA, right? And the aircraft will tattle on us if we overspeed the flaps or what have you. And that has driven down the accident rate, right? That's made flying safer. If you look at driving, you've got this kind of utilization-based insurance that's already out there that's helping, drivers being safer. And so now we're just at the very beginning of this, and for the first time being able to take sort of utilization-based insurance and really create this thing that hasn't really existed in sort of aviation insurance, this idea of having high definition underwriting. You're not just being lumped in with everybody else who happens to want to have, multi-engine CFI renter's insurance. But you've got a product that now is looking at your performance as an individual and assigning the risk and the pricing on a much more focused level. We're starting with renter's insurance, and gosh, where it goes from here, and we're just at the beginning. So it looks pretty exciting.
Indeed. Now, you brought up a multi-engine aircraft. I'm guessing that the rates are going to be a little bit different if someone is flying a multi versus a single. And is that true? If the hull values are the same, are multis perceived as being a little bit more risky for equal hull values with single-engine aircraft?
Not only that, but just if you have a gear-up landing in a multi-engine, it's 2-engine teardowns, right? So what we did with this is we took what is typically a very kind of onerous, bespoke process where you're talking to a broker on the phone, and they're kind of digging into all the things that can sort of affect what kind of package you need to buy, and actually made it into packages. So unlike typical renter's insurance where you're answering a bunch of questions. We've actually simplified it down to being able to buy sort of a bronze through a platinum package. So even just selecting what level of insurance you need is become simpler. And so you've got kind of on the low end, a bronze package for a private pilot flying single engine before any discounts are applied. Might be $155 a year. That's like $12 a month. And then if you're multi-engine flight instructor, it could be like $2,304 a year. So that's like $192 a month. So there's a broad range, but it's going to look at you as a pilot in a much more focused way than other sort of insurance does. And it's also simpler to buy because we've sort of put it into, do you need the bronze package? Do you need the silver package? Or is platinum more your stuff?
Now, I was just buying some software today, and of course, there was about a 20% difference if I went monthly versus buying the year. So, of course, I went for the year, and hopefully I'll use the software.
No difference in price. You're not paying more.
That's fascinating.
To get monthly coverage. You'll pay the same price. And again, the discounts can lower the price, but the data will never make the insurance more expensive. That's something that folks who have done some of the sort of the automotive gadgets and such. Here, we've already got the data in the cockpit. We're all flying with iPads anyways. So now let's use some of that data to actually benefit us, both from a standpoint of saving some money, but more importantly, let's be safer.
We've talked mostly about airplanes, both single and multi-engine. What about other types of aircraft, helicopters, gliders, things like that? Is there a need for insurance with those aircraft types, and is that being offered?
So one thing we see is someone who might be learning to fly helicopters might only need 3 months of rotorcraft renter's insurance while they're, in that training sequence. So out of the gate today, the Stargate app does support single engine piston, multi-engine piston, rotorcraft, and seaplane.
Got it. Okay. And gliders, you're on your own.
We're not there yet.
Yeah, I was just thinking the value of many of those is going to be a little bit less anyway, and certainly not as much glider activity. So how long would it take me and I haven't done this, if I downloaded the app from start to finish, what's typical time to be insured?
It's pretty instantaneous. Now, you can't buy insurance for a flight that you took yesterday, but you can actually get insurance for the same day. So I can download the app. I can go to my broker's website and create an account if I'm already working with a broker, or if I'm not working with a broker, I can actually just buy the insurance via the app. In both cases, you can get insurance for the same day. So I could potentially download the app in the morning and be covered when I fly in the afternoon.
That's great. I've got a question I want to ask you in a moment that's slightly different, but before we wrap up on this, anything else you'd like to talk about regarding insurance?
I think that learning to fly is really about being able to manage risk, right? And not a lot of pilots really who rent aircraft have renter's insurance. It's actually a low percentage, often because they think they're well covered because of some other policy. They just forget, whatever it may be. This is an easy way to make sure you can sleep at night and know that you're managing that financial risk when it comes to flying. We've got a handy dandy website you can check out at www.stargate.com. And that's Starr with 2 R's, by the way. Kind of important. And we've got a kind of an entertaining explainer video online for you there. Plus, you can find the app by searching the Apple App Store.
Super. Well, that's great. Well, let me just ask you something that's a little bit off topic. I've always thought of you as a very innovative guy who's always watching what's going on in the aviation world, has his finger on the pulse of what's new and what's changing. What are you seeing out there as you watch the world? What do you think are new opportunities that pilots and entrepreneurs and innovators should be thinking about?
Well, the world's changing pretty fast. And
I've noticed that.
And aviation for a long time was almost allergic to innovation, right? New things often, get sneered at, whether it's putting a parachute on an airplane or
Oh, nobody would do that. That's
Landing a
terrible.
rocket and then using it again, like crazy. So I think we're kind of coming into a golden age where innovation is allowed again in this space, whether it's the Part 121 sort of airline transport world, whether it's things that people are doing in the charter space, things that are happening in terms of the planes we fly and how we fly them. Lots of new things are going to happen. Now, not all of it's going to work, but even if some of it does, it's going to be pretty amazing. And so I don't know. They used to say that the golden age of aviation was like the 1920s, right? Well, I disagree with that. The golden age of aviation is going to be now and the near future. In the 1920s, you either had to be a titan of industry, famous, or a crazy person to fly an airplane. Well, now it's way better. So I think it's a pretty exciting time to be involved in aviation.
I agree with you. If I think back to flying in the 80s and the 90s, to me, there was change that was occurring in general aviation, but it was on a glacial time scale. You had to be watching for thousands of years to perceive the change. And yet in the last 15 years, wow, change has just accelerated tremendously. And so I think you're right. I think we've got a convergence of both internet kinds of technologies. People can now apply computing power to the different solutions. And people are looking at aviation as a new area, I think, for innovation and investment. So I agree. This truly could be the golden age. The one thing that might hold it back, I think, would be if the economy doesn't bounce back, then there's not going to be as much investment if we don't get our economy back sometime soon.
Yeah, I just know that no matter what the economy is doing, people's time is always going to be super precious. And so that's something that is never going to go away, no matter what happens to the economy. So as long as that is true, flying airplanes, whether for fun or for profit, is going to be part of a lot of people's lives.
Sure. And I guess if you can save time when you're buying insurance, that's a good thing too.
Got to start somewhere.
Exactly. Well, good. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of your time with us here today.
Thanks for having me back, Max. Call anytime.
I want to thank Rod for sharing his time with us and for telling us about Stargate, which you can find more information about at stargate.com, Starr with 2 R's in it. Rod is an awesome guy, and I'm really happy we have so many innovative people like him in our industry. Well, we're going to wrap up here, and please don't forget to tell your friends about the show, because that's how we get most of our new listeners, when people like you tell their friends about the Aviation News Talk podcast. And if they don't know what a podcast is, and that's quite likely, just send them out to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store, where they can download our dedicated Aviation News Talk podcast apps for iOS and Android. In the App Store, just search for Aviation News Talk. And yes, those apps are free. So until next time, fly safely, have fun, and keep the blue side up.